When my son-in-law forgot his briefcase at my house, I never expected what would happen next. The latch broke, papers scattered everywhere, and what I found inside changed everything. I'm a 65-year-old grandfather who discovered something that put my entire family in danger. This is my story. On a Tuesday morning in October, my son-in-law forgot his leather briefcase when he left for work. When I picked it up to put it away, the latch came loose. Documents scattered everywhere. I'm Richard Phillips, 65 years old, and what I saw in those papers changed everything. If you're listening to this from somewhere far away, please stay with me until the end, because what happened next will shock you. My name is Richard Phillips. I'm 65, a retired high school principal from Minneapolis, Minnesota. 3 years ago, my wife, Susan, died suddenly of a heart attack while we were working in our garden. We'd been married 38 years. We'd planned our retirement together, travel to Europe, spend winters in Arizona, watch our grandchildren grow up in the house we'd bought in Minnetonka, but life doesn't care about your plans. One August afternoon, Susan was watering the tomatoes. The next moment, she was gone. Just like that. 38 years of marriage ended in the time it takes to draw a breath. Jennifer, my only daughter, begged me to move in with her family. "Dad, you can't live alone in that big house," she'd said, her eyes still red from crying at the funeral. "We have plenty of room. Ashley and Michael would love having Grandpa around all the time." I'd resisted at first. I was still strong, still capable. I could manage on my own. But my granddaughter Ashley was 6 then, my grandson Michael barely 3. Jennifer was working full-time as an administrative assistant at a law firm downtown. Her husband Brian worked as a real estate agent with unpredictable hours. They needed help. And honestly, I needed them too. So I sold the old house and helped Jennifer and Brian with the down payment on their 2-story colonial at 2847 Lakeview Drive. It was a beautiful place, much bigger than what they could have afforded alone. The down payment I provided was $48,000, nearly half of what they needed. The guest room on the first floor became my room. It wasn't the retirement Susan and I had dreamed of, but it was family. That was 3 years ago. Now, on this particular Tuesday morning in October, I woke at 6:30, as always. The house was quiet except for the coffee maker Jennifer had set to brew before she left for work at 7:15. I padded downstairs in my slippers, poured myself coffee, and started preparing breakfast for Ashley and Michael. This had become my routine. Mornings with the grandchildren, getting them ready for school, making sure they had proper meals. Ashley appeared first, already dressed in her school uniform, her dark hair neatly brushed. She was 8 now, mature for her age, with my serious brown eyes and careful way of thinking everything through. "Morning. Grandpa?" she said, climbing onto her chair. "Good morning, sweetheart. Pancakes?" "Yes, please." Michael thundered down the stairs moments later, his Spider-Man pajama top on backward, his light brown hair sticking up everywhere. He was 5, all energy and enthusiasm. "Grandpa, chocolate chip pancakes?" "Good morning to you too, mister. Yes, chocolate chip. But first, let's fix that shirt." I was flipping pancakes, listening to Ashley read from her chapter book, and Michael talk about his dream about flying dinosaurs when Brian came downstairs. My son-in-law was 38, tall and fit, always dressed in expensive suits, always on his phone. He'd married Jennifer 9 years ago, and at first I'd been happy for them. Brian had seemed successful, stable, attentive, but over the past year, something had started bothering me about him. Nothing I could put my finger on, just small things. The way he never quite looked at you when he spoke. The way his stories about work never had real details. The way Jennifer had become quieter, more withdrawn. "Morning, Rich," Brian said, not looking up from his phone as he grabbed his travel mug. He'd always called me Rich, never Dad. Just Rich, like we were colleagues. "Good morning, Brian. Would you like breakfast?" "No time. Big showing this morning. Clients flying in from California." He was typing on his phone, that expensive Rolex catching the morning light. Jennifer had mentioned that watch cost $15,000. For a real estate agent who claimed business was tight, Brian certainly had expensive tastes. "Kids doing okay?" he asked, barely glancing at Ashley and Michael. "They're fine. Michael, you're getting syrup on your shirt." Brian nodded absently. "Great. Okay, I'm out. Big day ahead." He grabbed his suit jacket, kissed the top of Ashley's head without really looking at her, and headed for the garage. Through the window, I watched his silver Lexus back down the driveway and speed off down Lakeview Drive. I finished serving, breakfast to the children, helped Michael clean up, and checked that Ashley had her homework in her backpack. The school bus would arrive at 8:15. After they left, the house felt too quiet. I poured another coffee and began cleaning up the breakfast dishes when I noticed it. Brian's leather briefcase sitting on the floor beside the sofa. He'd forgotten it. That was odd. Brian never forgot his briefcase. It was like an extension of his arm, always with him, always locked tight. In 3 years of living here, I'd never seen him leave the house without it. I walked over and looked down at it. Brown leather, expensive looking, the kind of briefcase a successful businessman would carry. It must be full of important documents for his showings, his client files, his contracts. I should call him, I thought. He couldn't have gotten far. The showing with the California clients, he'd need his materials. I picked up the briefcase, heavy, definitely full of papers. I'd just take it out to my car and drive it over to his office. The latch wasn't closed properly. My fingers had barely gripped the handle when the briefcase slipped from my hands and hit the hardwood floor with a heavy thump that echoed through the empty house. The latch gave way on impact. Documents exploded across the hardwood floor, white papers sliding in every direction like a deck of cards scattered by an angry dealer. For a moment, I just stood there staring at the mess. My first thought was embarrassment. Brian would think I'd been snooping. My second thought was practical. I needed to gather these up quickly and put them back before he realized what happened. I dropped to my knees and started collecting the papers, not really looking at them, just trying to gather them into some order. That's when I saw it. The letterhead on the first document stopped me cold. Property Transfer Agreement, State of Minnesota. My hands began to shake as I pulled the paper closer to read it properly. At the top in bold letters. Transfer of real property. Property address: 2847 Lakeview Drive, Minnetonka, Minnesota, 55345. Our address. This house, the house where I'd been living for 3 years, the house I'd helped Jennifer and Brian purchase with my $48,000 down payment. I scanned down the page, my heart beginning to hammer against my ribs. Transferor: Richard Phillips. Transferee: Brian Alexander Stevens. Property value: $485,000. $485,000. My name was there right next to Jennifer's. Both of us signing away the house to Brian, transferring complete ownership. Except I had never signed this document. I'd never even seen it before today. I brought the paper closer to my face, studying the signature at the bottom. It looked like mine. The distinctive way I wrote the capital R in Richard. The slight forward slant of my handwriting. But something was wrong. The pressure of the pen was too even, too perfect, like someone had traced it very carefully, studying every curve and loop. A forgery. A very good forgery, but a forgery nonetheless. My stomach dropped as I reached for another document in the pile. Transfer of recreational property. Property address: 1842 North Shore Road, Two Harbors, Minnesota. The cabin. Susan and I had bought that little A-frame cabin on Lake Superior 15 years ago. It wasn't much, just 2 bedrooms, a stone fireplace, and a stunning view of the water. But it had been our sanctuary. We'd spent every summer there, watching the sunset over the lake, listening to the waves crash against the rocky shore. After Susan died, I couldn't bear to sell it. Jennifer understood. She'd taken Ashley and Michael there last summer. Now Brian was taking that too. Property value: $125,000. Transferor: Richard Phillips. Transferee, Brian Alexander Stevens. Another forged signature. Another piece of my life being stolen. I grabbed the next document with trembling hands. Account transfer authorization. First National Bank of Minnesota. The investment account. The one Susan and I had built slowly over 35 years of teaching. We'd been careful, conservative, putting away what we could, letting compound interest do its work. It was supposed to be for emergencies, for Ashley and Michael's college funds, for giving Jennifer some security after I was gone. Account number 84729355518. Account holder, Richard Phillips. Current balance, $185,000. Transfer to Brian A. Stevens, individual account number 84755698823. $185,000. 35 years of saving. 35 years of choosing the modest vacation, the older car, the simple dinner at home instead of the expensive restaurant. All of it transferred to Brian's personal account. I sat back on my heels, surrounded by papers, doing the math in my head. The house, $485,000. The cabin, $125,000. The investment account, $185,000. Total, $795,000. $795,000. Everything I had. Everything Susan and I had built together over a lifetime of work. Everything I'd planned to leave for Jennifer and the grandchildren. Brian was taking it all. But this wasn't some desperate scheme thrown together in a moment of weakness. These documents were professional quality. The forgeries were nearly perfect. The legal language was precise and airtight. Someone had planned this carefully, methodically. My son-in-law hadn't just decided to steal from us. He'd been preparing for this for months, maybe years. How long had he been sitting at our dinner table, playing with his children, calling my daughter his wife, all while plotting to destroy us financially? I forced myself to keep looking through the papers. There had to be more. Bank statements from accounts I didn't recognize, email printouts about wire transfers, a business card for a law office in Fargo, North Dakota. Why North Dakota? And then, at the bottom of the pile, a sticky note in Brian's handwriting. Exit plan, October 25th, Mexico City. Don't forget passport. Exit plan, Mexico City. I looked at the calendar on my phone. Today was October 15th. 10 days. Brian was planning to disappear in 10 days, taking everything we had with him. The realization hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just about stealing money. Brian was planning to vanish completely. What about Jennifer? What about Ashley and Michael? Would he take them with him? Leave them behind with nothing? Did my daughter even know what her husband was planning? The sound of a car engine cut through my panic. I looked up, my heart stopping completely. Through the window, I could see Brian's silver Lexus turning back into the driveway. He'd come back. He'd realized he'd forgotten the briefcase. I looked down at my hands. Papers everywhere, evidence scattered across the floor, the briefcase lying open, its contents exposed, the engine cut off, a car door slammed. I had maybe 30 seconds, maybe less. Footsteps on the front porch. Quick, purposeful. I heard the jingle of keys, the scrape of metal against metal as he found the right one. The deadbolt turned with a heavy click. The front door began to open. My body moved before my brain could catch up. I dropped to the floor, scooping up papers with both hands, shoving them back into the briefcase in no particular order. Property transfers mixed with bank statements. The sticky note about Mexico got crushed between pages. My fingers fumbled with the broken latch, trying to force it closed even though I knew it wouldn't hold. The door swung open fully. Rich? Brian's voice, casual, curious. I looked up from my position on the floor, one hand still pressing down on the overstuffed briefcase. Our eyes met. For a split second, I saw something flicker across his face. Suspicion, calculation. But then it was gone, replaced by that easy smile he always wore. You okay down there? He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. His tie was still perfectly knotted, his jacket over one arm. Did something fall? Your briefcase, I said, standing up slowly, brushing off my knees, keeping my body between Brian and the briefcase. The latch must have been loose. Everything spilled out when I picked it up to bring it to you. I watched his jaw tighten just for a moment. Then he laughed, short and controlled. Yeah, that latch has been giving me trouble. I keep meaning to get it fixed. He walked toward me, hand extended. I'll take it. Realized I'd forgotten it about 2 blocks away. I bent down, picking up the briefcase, and handed it to him. Our fingers touched briefly as he took it. His hands were cool, steady. Mine were trembling. Sorry about the mess, I said. I tried to put everything back in order, but don't worry about it, he interrupted, testing the latch. It wouldn't close properly. Just papers, nothing important. Nothing important. 795,000 in forged documents, my entire life savings. Nothing important. I was going to drive it to you, I continued, forcing myself to maintain eye contact. Figured you might need it for your showing. Appreciate that, Rich. But you didn't have to trouble yourself. I would have come back for it eventually. He was watching me too carefully, looking for something in my expression, my body language. Did he know? Could he tell that I'd seen everything? No trouble, I said, moving toward the kitchen, putting distance between us. Would you like some coffee before you head out? Fresh pot? Can't. Running late already. But he didn't move toward the door. He stood there, briefcase under his arm, studying the floor where the papers had scattered, as if he could somehow tell what I'd seen. Did you look through any of this stuff? His voice was casual, but there was an edge underneath. My heart stopped. What? I turned back from the coffee pot, forcing confusion onto my face. No, why would I? Just wondering. Some of it's confidential client information. Real estate deals. You know how people get about privacy. I was just trying to pick everything up and get it back in the case, I said. The lie came easier than I expected. Maybe because I'd spent 35 years as a principal, learning to read when students were lying to me. Now I was the one performing. I barely looked at anything. Just saw a bunch of legal forms and numbers. Brian nodded slowly. Right, of course. He adjusted his grip on the briefcase, then walked to the door. He paused with his hand on the knob. Hey, Rich, one more thing. My breath caught. Yeah? The kids' school called about some permission slip for a field trip. Did Jennifer leave it somewhere? Kitchen counter, I think. Want me to check? No, I'll grab it tonight. He smiled again. See you later. The door closed behind him. I heard his footsteps on the porch, the car door slam, the engine start. Through the window, I watched the Lexus back down the driveway and disappear down the street. Only then did I allow myself to breathe. My legs gave out. I sank into the nearest chair, my coffee cup shaking in my hand so badly that liquid sloshed over the rim onto the table. He'd come back, stood right there, asked if I'd looked through his papers, and I'd lied to his face. But Brian knew something was off. I'd seen it in his eyes, in the way he'd studied me, asked those careful questions. He suspected, which meant I had even less time than I thought. I spent that first week doing what I'd always done, taking care of Ashley and Michael, preparing meals, keeping the house running. But now I was watching, remembering, putting pieces together. I thought back over the past year, over all the small things that had bothered me. Jennifer's bruises. 3 months ago, I'd noticed dark marks on her upper arms. I bumped into the car door, she'd said. So clumsy lately. But the bruises were shaped like fingers. Brian's late nights. He claimed he had showings, client dinners, networking events, but when I'd casually asked Jennifer about his big sales, she'd looked confused. Sales? He said the market's been slow. The separate bank accounts. Jennifer had mentioned once, hesitantly, that Brian insisted they keep their finances separate. He says it's cleaner that way, less complicated. Less complicated for whom? The phone calls Brian took outside, pacing in the backyard, his voice too low to hear. The mail he insisted on collecting himself, sorting through it in his car before bringing it inside. The way Jennifer had become quieter over the past 6 months. Thinner, more withdrawn, always tired. I thought it was stress from work, from raising 2 young children, from life. Now I wondered if it was fear. On Thursday evening, I was folding laundry in my room when I heard raised voices upstairs. Brian and Jennifer arguing in their bedroom. "Told you to be more careful with the credit cards," Brian's voice, sharp with anger. "I'm sorry, I was just trying to—" Jennifer's voice, frightened, pleading. "Do you have any idea how close you came to ruining everything?" I didn't hear a sound. Something hitting the wall. Jennifer cried out. I stood frozen, my hand gripping one of Michael's small shirts. Every instinct screamed at me to go up there, to intervene. But something Susan had taught me during our marriage stopped me. She'd been a chess player, patient and strategic. "Sometimes the best move is to wait," she'd always said. "To watch, to learn your opponent's patterns before you make your counter move." I forced myself to stay where I was, to listen, to remember every word. On Saturday morning, Brian announced he had an out-of-town showing. Big commercial property in Duluth. Might be gone all day, maybe overnight if the negotiations run long. After he left, I waited an hour to be sure. Then I went to his home office. The door was locked, as always, but I'd been a high school principal for 35 years. I knew how to pick simple locks with a bobby pin, some skills you never forget. The office was neat. Too neat. Brian's laptop sat closed on the desk, his filing cabinets lined against one wall. Everything organized with military precision. I started with the filing cabinet. The first drawer was labeled Current Clients. Property listings, buyer profiles, showing schedules, everything looked legitimate. The second drawer, Closed Deals. More property files, commission statements, closing documents. Nothing suspicious. I moved to his desk. The drawers contained usual office supplies, business cards, a few personal items. Then I found it, hidden at the back of the bottom drawer underneath a stack of old magazines, a small leather portfolio, the kind you'd use for important documents you wanted to keep separate. Inside were bank statements, but not for accounts I recognized. Cayman International Bank. Account holder, B. Stevens. Current balance, $387,492. My hands shook as I flipped to the next statement. Bank of Panama. Account holder, Brian A. Stevens. Current balance, $521,750. First Caribbean International, $643,280. Deutsche Bank, Luxembourg, $291,630. Bank of Singapore, $445,920. Swiss International, 738450. I kept going, my breath coming faster with each statement. By the time I finished, I'd documented 11 offshore accounts. The total came to $2,847,340. This wasn't just about stealing from me and Jennifer. Brian had been running this operation for years, funneling millions through fake identities and offshore accounts. I found more in the portfolio, email printouts discussing inventory transfers and shipment processing, coded language that clearly meant money laundering, references to someone named Petrov in Fargo who was reliable for larger transactions. Brian had partners. This was a network. I photographed everything with my phone, then carefully returned it all exactly as I'd found it. I relocked the office door and went back to my room, my entire body shaking. Monday morning, I told Jennifer I had a doctor's appointment in Minneapolis. The law firm Morrison & Associates was located downtown near the courthouse. I'd found them through research. They specialized in elder financial abuse cases. Attorney Jessica Williams was in her 50s with sharp eyes and graying hair. Mr. Phillips, she said, shaking my hand firmly, tell me everything. I did. I started with the briefcase falling, the forged documents transferring my assets into Brian's name. I showed her the photos from his office, the offshore accounts, the money laundering evidence, the Mexico exit plan. William's expression grew darker with each detail. Mr. Phillips, she said when I finished, this isn't just fraud. This is organized financial crime, identity theft, and if your daughter is being threatened or harmed, we're looking at potential domestic violence charges as well. What can we do? My voice was steady, but my hands were clasped tight in my lap. We need law enforcement involved immediately. She picked up her phone. I work with a detective who handles white-collar crime. 20 minutes later, Detective Nicholas Johnson arrived. He was in his early 40s with the calm, assessing manner of someone who'd seen it all. I went through everything again, the documents, the accounts, the evidence. When I finished, Johnson leaned back in his chair. Brian Stevens, he said, or should I say, Timothy Nathan Brooks. I froze. What? We've been looking for Timothy Brooks for 8 months. He's wanted in Nebraska for running a real estate fraud scheme, convinced elderly investors to put money into non-existent properties, then disappeared with over $300,000. My stomach turned. Brian had done this before, to other families, other victims. The Nebraska authorities lost his trail in North Dakota, Johnson continued. Looks like he reinvented himself as Brian Stevens, moved to Minnesota and started over. What do we do? I asked. First, we need to keep Jennifer and the children safe. If Brooks suspects we're onto him, he could panic. Men like this, when they're cornered, they become unpredictable. Johnson looked at me seriously. Can you keep up appearances for 2 more days? Act normal. Don't let him know anything's changed. I'll try, I said. That evening, I arrived home to find Jennifer standing in the kitchen, her back to me, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. When she turned around, her face was red and swollen from crying, and there on her right arm, just above the elbow, was a dark purple bruise in the unmistakable shape of fingers. Sweetheart, I whispered, moving toward her. What happened? She broke down completely. The story came pouring out through her tears. It had started 6 months ago, just yelling at first, cruel things when Brian was stressed. Then he started grabbing her, pushing her. Yesterday, I asked about some credit card charges I didn't recognize, Jennifer whispered. Thousands of dollars. He grabbed my arm and squeezed until I thought it would break. He said I had no right to question him. Why didn't you tell me? I held her close. Because he said if I told anyone, you, the police, he'd take Ashley and Michael somewhere I'd never find them. He said he has resources to disappear with the kids, and I'd spend the rest of my life wondering if they were safe. I pulled my daughter into my arms. You're not alone anymore, and you're not trapped. I've been gathering evidence. I have a lawyer. The police are involved. Brian Stevens, that's not even his real name, is going to prison. Jennifer pulled back, eyes wide. What? I told her everything. The forged documents, the offshore accounts totaling over $2.8 million, the fact that Brian was actually Timothy Brooks, wanted in Nebraska for fraud. The Mexico escape plan. The police are getting an arrest warrant, I said. By Wednesday, he'll be in custody. Wednesday? Jennifer looked terrified. Dad, Brian told me we're taking a family trip this weekend, just the 4 of us. He won't say where, just keeps calling it a surprise. He specifically said you're not invited. Ice flooded my veins. Not. October 25th. This weekend. Brian was moving his timeline up. He knew somehow. You're not going on any trip, I said firmly. Tomorrow I need you to call in sick to work. You and the children are going to stay with your Aunt Rebecca in St. Cloud. You'll be safe there. The next morning at 5:30, before Brian woke, I knocked on Jennifer's door. She answered immediately, already dressed. Get the children, I said. Pack 1 bag each, we're leaving now. We were backing out of the garage when Brian appeared in the doorway, still in pajamas, his face twisted with rage. Where the hell do you think you're going? He shouted. Away from you, Jennifer said, her voice shaking but firm. Brian moved toward the car. I hit the button to close the garage door. "Jennifer, those are my children!" "They're my children!" Jennifer shouted back. "And I'm protecting them from you!" I drove fast, hands tight on the wheel. Behind us, the silver Lexus kept appearing. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. "This is Richard Phillips. I'm being pursued by Timothy Nathan Brooks, wanted in Nebraska for fraud." Then I saw them. Police cars with flashing lights. Behind us, more patrol cars appeared, boxing Brian in. His Lexus swerved, trying to escape, but there was nowhere to go. Through the rear window, we watched as Brian stopped his car. Police surrounded him, guns drawn. Brian got out slowly, hands raised. Then he looked back at our car with pure hatred in his eyes. The police moved in. Handcuffs clicked. Brian Stevens, Timothy Nathan Brooks, was pushed into the back of a patrol car. 2 days later, Detective Johnson told us everything. Timothy Nathan Brooks, wanted in 3 states for fraud totaling over $3.2 million. We've frozen all offshore accounts. Your quick action likely prevented him from disappearing with millions more. 8 months later, I'm sitting on the back porch of our new home in St. Cloud, watching Ashley and Michael play. The house is smaller, but it's ours. Jennifer looks healthier now. The shadows under her eyes are gone. My phone buzzed. A text from Detective Johnson. "Brooks sentenced today. 28 years federal prison. Won't be eligible for parole until age 66. That evening, after the children were in bed, I sat alone watching the sunset. At 65, I'd discovered I was stronger than I knew. Age isn't weakness, it's wisdom, experience, the patience to watch and wait and plan. If someone had told me a year ago that I'd uncover a multi-million-dollar fraud scheme, help bring down a criminal network, save my family from a predator hiding in plain sight, I would have said they were crazy. I was just rich, just a retired principal. But that's the thing about being underestimated. Brian saw an old man, a widower, someone weak and easy to manipulate. He never saw the 35 years of dealing with troubled students, the patience learned from raising a daughter, the strength built from surviving loss. He never saw me until it was too late. To anyone listening who might be in a similar situation, trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, investigate. Don't be afraid to act. Age is not weakness, it's accumulated wisdom. Use it. Thank you for staying with me until the end. Now I have grandchildren to spoil and a peaceful life to live. That's the greatest revenge of all. Sometimes life's greatest lessons come wrapped in the ugliest packages, and sometimes the most dangerous predators wear the faces of family. Never mistake a quiet man's patience for weakness. We've been watching, learning, and preparing our entire lives for moments like these.